Hey, it's okay. It's alright. Just admit it. Just admit that you missed the show. Admit that you missed the show. Yes, come to terms with it. You're processing it. You're realising it. Thursday nights, a little bit more boring in the last 20 weeks or so. Yeah, I know. Mine too. We're back now. Welcome back to the Blacktown Football Hour Podcast, episode 1 for 2023. My name is Mark DePoli. It was last year. It still is now. Thank you for joining us. A little bit different. Let's cue the intro music. I haven't actually recorded the intro music yet, and the podcast is going up tonight. So whatever I whip up on GarageBand in the next 9 hours or so, it's going to be something special. I promise you, it will be. This year, we are upping the ante just that little bit, you know? Have to improve on 2022. Always, onwards and upwards, as I always say. Everything's going to be bigger, better, faster, and stronger. And that's not just me, I mean the episode as well. So, I hope you enjoy the ride. I think it's going to be a good one. Last year, we began the podcast by looking at the NPL season. If you do remember, Brad Attard, if you remember him, and Darren Glover were on as well. He talked about his story in the refereeing world and beyond. But this year, we are going to be starting with a more somber tone. But before I really command your attention and need you to focus on a really important set of topics, I think we'll keep it on a more light-hearted note for now, and we'll ease into the gritty part of the episode. I'd love to rattle up some results because we've actually started the season across the board. Not quite our local season, but in the NPL world we have. So let's get right into the results. Let's start with the team who are just quietly the hottest prospect in the Football New South Wales League 1 men's competition, where your Blacktown Spartans first grade boys sit top of the table with 13 points after the first 5 games. Both the 20s and first grade started their season away at North Taramara against Northern Tigers, both with 1-0 wins, dual clean sheets on the road, an unprecedented start, very, very good to kick off the season. Then we went, of course, to SD Raiders and continued that good start. A 2-1 win in the 20s and a 3-1 win for the first graders meant that we were perfect in the first 4. We then hosted Bankstown City, and a hard-fought 2-0 loss for our 20s was then backed up by a very late wonder goal to make sure that we actually did score in the night from William Di Martino in first grade, so 1-1 that ended. And then before we went to Dulwich Hill, a 1-0 20s loss on the road before first grade recovered with a 3-1 win on the road again, which is fantastic. And most recently, a 6-point evening, which is awesome to say the 20s beat Central Coast United 2-0, and the first grade came from behind once again to win 2-1 in an enthralling tie here at Blacktown Football Park. They're away on the road again this week, and it feels like they're just journeymen at the moment, but I'm sure they'll come back around the second half of the season to beat at home, which I'm very much looking forward to. In Football New South Wales Youth League 1, a new competition for us this year, the Spartans boys 13s are 2 wins from 3. The 14s have a draw, a loss and a win, so 1 result of each. The 15s are yet to find their first 3 points of the year, but that's okay, there's still plenty of time. While the 16s are also 2 from 3 and also sitting third place in the table. And finally, the 18s are also looking for their first win of the year. It's been a bit of a difficult transitional period for them, but I'm sure they'll get there as coached by Marty, the excellent man that he is. In the AYL season now, listen in for this, your ears will prick up for sure, which is only 2 rounds old, mind you. However, all of our age groups have combined to play 7 total games, so not all of the age groups have played 2 games across both rounds. But for those games that have been played, 7 games total, 6 wins of those 7. It's been a wonderful start to the AYL season for James Charles boys, and I'm excited to... That was very Aussie. I'm very excited to see how the rest of the season turns out, but it's been a very, very good start across many levels in the BDSFA and Spartans world, so keep an eye out. And don't forget to come and watch some games as well. Fixtures to look out for coming up. Your girls and women kick off their NPL season this weekend here against Bankstown City, which will be interesting because there's a couple of former players in the senior space returning to Blacktown Football Park for round 1, which is excellent, which is giving me a lot of fun. Certainly a very entertaining start to the season, and not many more clubs I would have liked to have seen in round 1 in terms of sparks flying, I'm sure. Also, the Australia Cup is in its early bird stages right now. It's preliminary rounds, and there are a couple of BDSFA deployed Premier League teams ready to test their hand. Quakers Juniors will take on Thirled JFC here at Blacktown Football Park Saturday night, 5 p.m, followed by a Blacktown derby. Of course, they drew each other, of course. Luck of the draw. Doonside versus the recently promoted Eastern Creek at 8 p.m. following that. So they'll get the previous game will finish from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Then they'll get a really good chunk of time to warm up, which is good because it's still very early in the season. We don't want any injuries. So proper warm up on the synthetic pitch. The following day, the Sunday, following the final Spartans women's first grade game, Parkley will host Kissing Point FC at 7:30 p.m. A late one on a Sunday night, but a good one to wrap up your weekend, or start it depending on how you look at the calendar. Whatever. Next door at Wanderers, in fact, if this podcast is going up at 7 p.m. on a Thursday night, an hour later, Glenwood Redbacks will be playing against Rouse Hill Rams. So sort of across the M7 derby, Glenwood are a club that border with the Hills Association anyway, so that's kind of cool in that way. So it's sort of a very local battle in that. So they're playing next on the synthetic pitch at Wanderers. So provided that this podcast goes up in time, I'll hopefully see you with headphones in watching that game next door. And that's it for all of our Australia Cup fixtures. But one final thing before I explain what to expect from this episode. Number one, we will be doing a Volunteer of the Week competition this week. Now, there was 25 episodes of the Blacktown Football Hour podcast last year. There could have been more if I hadn't have got the cocoa and didn't end it one sort of episode prematurely. So we could have had about 26, 27 episodes. There's 24 Blacktown clubs, meaning that we can have about one Volunteer of the Week per club, which I think is fantastic. And then maybe we make it more of a competition where a club can put in a second entrant and win a second time when we get towards the finals time of the season. Sorry, I'm just forgetting how to talk here. So obviously clubs, look out for my email, which will be confirming how that process works. You'll be given a week in which you are to nominate a volunteer, and I'll be very sad if you don't, because there are plenty of people who deserve it. So Club Volunteer of the Year. So make sure you spend that extra time putting out the cones at training, or sticking around behind, or putting in those extra hours if you've got the time to do it, of course, because you could very well be the person who features on the Club Volunteer of the Week segment of the Blacktown Football Hour podcast as this show continues on well into the year. So something to think about, perhaps. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty part of the episode, and this is where I really want to command your attention, and the funnies will stop. Probably for the rest of the episode, to be honest. You're going to meet Mark Thompson from the recently mentioned Glenwood Redbacks. He's a Glenwood committee member and a valued member of the Glenwood's over 35 squad. That 35 squad is a really awesome one that is known around the BDSFA in that sort of age group for being a really tight-knit group who've been together for a long time. 9 years, in fact, as you'll find out as the interview segment goes on. However, in the off-season, they suffered tragedy. And before we watch any further, I'd like to just give a warning. This is at your discretion. The topic of passing away is discussed in this episode. However, I do encourage those with open ears to listen to the takeaway message that does come from today's episode. It's prevalent. When Lewis Camacho suffered cardiac arrest, some very forward-thinking in Glenwood uniforms took it upon themselves to honour their friend, their long-time friend, by assuring that they shone a light among the darkness. Today is a really important episode. I think it's important that it's episode 1 because we can start the season on the right foot in supporting a really good cause. You're also going to meet Angelo Tiloca from an organisation called Heartbeat of Football, and you might have seen them around the comment section of the BDSFA Facebook page recently. He's a fantastic spokesperson on the topic of today's podcast. A final thank you, and a moment for me to personally give an appreciation to Mark Thompson. He was very brave on speaking on behalf of Glenwood, his recovering over 35s team, and the family of Lewis Camacho. So thank you, Mark. Thanks to everybody involved in this episode, and thank you to Glenwood as well. Lots to take from this episode, as I just put my notes away. And particularly for males, but as well as you'll find out for females as well, looking after your heart is important, and there are certainly ways to lower your risks, and you're about to learn all about that. So I really do encourage that you sit through and watch this. I'll see you at the end of the episode. Today I'm at the home of Glenwood Redbacks, one of the biggest and one of the most grand clubs in the history of the BDSFA, a wonderful family-orientated club. I'm joined by one of their club officials and over 35 members, Mark Thompson, who's been brave today in joining me in what's been a difficult pre-season for his team and the club in general, as you'll find out. Essentially, Glenwood suffered the passing of a beloved club member in Lewis Camacho from cardiac arrest a couple of weeks ago. And to the club's credit, they were very quick in making sure that his legacy and the honour of his name was remembered and was preached around on social media and around the grounds the day it happened, essentially. I heard that there was a wonderful funeral proceeding as well last week, and I hope that his name is able to be kept in the same positive light today with our first episode of the Blacktown Football Hour Podcast, and that we can use this opportunity to make something good come from something that was very, very sad and tragic indeed. So Mark, firstly, thanks very much for joining us here. You're putting on a brave face and I appreciate that. Why don't you tell me first and foremost, as I pass you the microphone, about this Glenwood Redbacks over 35s team. A little bit about how long you guys have been together, what got you together in the first place. Let's set the scene a little bit.
Yeah, so pretty much the team started 9 years ago, roughly. I started the team, and I'd like to say that probably 12 out of the normally registered 18 are still with us today. Kind of had a policy when I first started that we don't kick anybody out. So they either leave on their own accord or have different views on like where they want to go. And I can proudly say that since day one, nine years ago, that no one's hardly left, unless they've either moved overseas. We've had a couple of move overseas or move in a state. But other than that, it's been the core group of guys for 9 years straight.
Fantastic. Would you suggest it was sort of like after 9 years, it's almost a decade, it's almost like a family at that point? You guys would obviously, I would imagine you'd be celebrating together as well. I'm sure you go out for drinks and dinner every now and then. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, no, we have I have a poker day every year at my house, and virtually the whole team comes along. Neighbours don't like it, but still it's okay. Every year since the day we started, we've had an end of season trip. So the boys just get away and let down their hair, which he came to every single one from day one. And we always have all our kids play here, so most of the kids play here. And it's definitely family orientated. I can definitely say that.
It's good. That's a sort of value and a sort of core belief of the whole Glenwood club. It's certainly something that I've felt in the time that I've spent here, whether it's been on commentating match of the round games or here doing any feature pieces. That's what I've noticed here. A lot of players tend to stick in for a long time at the club, and teams tend to stick together as well, all the way up through the ranks and through the years. And so it's good to hear that squad stayed together for so long and was able to have a time together off the pitch as well. From what I heard and from what I saw on social media and from around the grounds and through the grapevine, is that Lewis had a very positive impact, not just on the team, but the club in general. If you wouldn't mind sharing, to whatever detail you'd be willing to go into, just about the impact of that day and finding out what had happened. Obviously, you'd be very tight in communication with your team. So, whatever you're willing to share with us, what came from that day, and what can you share with us?
Yep. So on the day, Lewis lives over at Padstow, and he was having a training run with another friend and a club. He likes to keep fit. He was actually one of the fittest players in the team, and finished the session, come off. His son rang him up, and he said to his son, just. Pretty much he said, I'm a bit out of breath. Can I call you when I get home? And his son said, yep, that's fine. And by that stage, everyone had left the park. And he got in his car and then didn't come home. So he, when he was found, because no one really knew, when he was found 3 hours later, he was clenched over the steering wheel. The car was still running. Music was on, and obviously that's when the ambulance was called and the police were called, and just apparently he just went. No one knows. It was just one of those things that unfortunately has happened, and yeah.
Thank you for sharing. In terms of the amount of time he's been at the club and with you guys, how has the response been from Glenwood in general? I know that there were social media posts, yes, of course, but obviously you're on the community as well. But have you been made to feel quite welcomed and allowed to be sad in this time? Have you felt quite welcome from the club, and have they been supportive?
100%. They've Caitlin Pickett has been straight away onto it. Been very been very appreciative of looking after the family of Lewis Camacho. So at first we didn't do anything, but then once I got confirmation that the family has told everybody, then Glenwood was all over it, and they posted a memorial, and you can see it on Facebook how they've done that. And then that's when we got the phone call saying Heart of
Football.
Sorry, the Heart of Football wanted to put them to come on board, because apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently it is a common thing for blokes our age that play this sport that this stuff happens. So they've been excellent. They've been excellent, really.
Excellent. That's very good to hear, and full credit to the Glenwood community for being such a positive breath of fresh air in what's been a bit of a difficult moment for them, certainly. Now, as you'll come to find in the next interview segment, which we're going to cut to now before we come back here to Glenwood's home ground towards the end of the podcast of episode 1 for 2023, you're going to find out a little bit about the relevance between and the relationship between sport and cardiac arrest and heart health issues. You're going to learn a lot, including statistics and including how to look after yourself in better ways, including dietary behaviours and just general lifestyle behaviours as well. So do stick around for that. It is not only impactful to people in the over 35s bracket, it is impactful to people who can be as young as 9. That interview's already happened, that's why I know to mention that. So it's important that you stick around and listen, and we'll see you in about 22 minutes or so for when we come back to the second half of this interview here. For the second part of the first episode of the Blacktown Football Hour podcast for 2023, I'm joined by Angelo from the Heartbeat of Football. He's kindly given his time to zoom in today, and he's going to be telling our audience a lot of things that they'll be needing to know ahead of the 1st of April and what they can know about themselves or the people around them in order to keep themselves safer when playing sport, and particularly, of course, football/soccer. It's a pleasure to have him on. I'm really grateful that he could fit some time in for us. Angelo, welcome to the Blacktown Football Hour podcast. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you very much for inviting us. And it's timely and it's important. Pre-season is a good way of getting a checkup. People service their cars, and they should need to service themselves as well. So that's an important message. We often neglect ourselves, but it's important that we get ourselves right in the pre-season, so we have a really enjoyable and safe season ahead.
Absolutely. I think we'll get right into it with the questions. I want this to be real hard-hitting 10 to 15 minutes of good content that people can share to their friends and to those around them in order to keep themselves safer. So I want to learn firstly about Heartbeat of Football. So how long have they existed and why do they exist? What do you guys do day to day, week to week? I already know a little bit about it, as we would have talked about over the phone, but can you inform our viewers of what you guys do?
So Heartbeat of Football started around 2014, or officially started 2015, but it was started because Andy Pascaletis, who many would know, voice of SBS and Fox Sports and voice of football in Australia for many, many years. His teammate collapsed on the football field during a match next to him, and sadly we lost him. And then he started hearing about more and more incidents. What Andy did from there was he took 6 months off his job. He was working for New South Wales Special Olympics as a fundraising ambassador there, and he took some time off to investigate it further and discovered that there were more and more heart health issues in our sport. But it's not only our sport, it happens across all sports. And so what he discovered was, there were more and more heart health issues being presented, and unfortunately we were losing more players. So he started the charity, and we work in with the Victor Chang nurses, and we go to football grounds every weekend, and we are in multiple places at the same time, and we conduct heart health checks. Within 10 minutes, people's blood pressure, their cholesterol, and their blood sugars are tested by nurses. They are provided with a results sheet, which looks a little bit like this, a bit like that, and so people get to know straight away, are they in a risky situation in one of those three factors? And the reason we do those three factors are that they are modifiable risk factors. So you can do things like stop smoking, exercise more, eat a little bit better, have a little bit less alcohol to adjust an impact on those readings, so your body and your heart in particular is in a much healthier range. And so, what we've done is we've tested over 4,300 people in New South Wales, in the ACT, in Victoria, and in Queensland. And it's been fantastic, the engagement. People love when we get there. And a lot of people don't know that they've got an issue because they've never been to the doctor. And typically the males are the worst because they don't go to the GP often, and they're a bit like a bull. They're a bit stubborn and they don't want to go. And so by us going to the ground, we take out one barrier for people to get tested. And so we test from people that are 18 years old and above. And so what we've found, and COVID's played a big part in this, the virus itself, is that in pre-COVID, at the average number of people that we tested that were recommended to go see GP for further tests, because in our tests they were elevated, one or more of those factors, was around 26, 28%. Post-COVID, that's shot up. And last year, one in every two people, 48%, were recommended to go see GP. And so it is alarming. We were sitting down, eating more than we needed to. We drank more in COVID. We didn't exercise enough because of those restrictions. Then, we're finding more and more about the virus itself, and people talk about long COVID and its impact on our bodies and our heart in particular. And so underlying conditions that we may not have known about are presenting themselves. And so, what we do as a prevention, and that's what we do, it's a preventative step, really helps people's awareness, and also for them to take action to change some of that. And we've had people that have come to our testing days, didn't know had an issue, and then a week or so later, or even months later, they're having major surgery, fixing up an issue they didn't know they had. And so we know that we play a part. We know we're saving lives in the community and growing the awareness. And we're not here to scare people. It's just an awareness. It's about, this is reality, and we can do something about it together by taking preventative action.
Absolutely. And that's what, of course, this is all about. Our viewers would have already seen parts of our segment with Glenwood Redbacks themselves already, so they know what's coming up. And I think this is just to reaffirm that it is a really important cause and opportunity for people that they should be taking advantage of and scheduling into their lives. My second question evolves around just a bit of sort of, I don't want you to give away all of your knowledge and your database about what you guys do. I think that's what April 1st is for, but could you give me a bit of an indication as to some of the ways that I should be looking after myself, particularly if I am, when I do get to that older age? I wouldn't say I'm in that sort of risk zone now, but obviously one day I will be. So can you give me a little bit of insight into some of the ways that I can look after myself a little bit better, be a bit more preventative in my behaviours and lower my risk of heart issues? What could you suggest to me?
Well, diet plays a big part. Eat good fats, good nuts, avocados. Protein, low fat. Everything's in moderation. It's not about wholesale changes to your life necessarily. It depends at what risk factor you are, but ultimately, as the Heart Foundation and many others suggest, a balanced diet. Regular exercise. Getting your heart rate up for 30 minutes, minimum of 3 or 4 days a week is really good. Don't smoke. That's a big contributor. And reduce your alcohol limits. And we're seeing there's a big influx and sort of trend of now alcohol beers and other spirits, and that has health benefits as well there, right? So look, they're the key things that people should be aware of. But the big message from us is, even doing all of that, get a regular checkup, because you're better to know than not know. Often we see people at grounds that are there and they feel a little bit unwell, or they're maybe a little bit overweight and they don't want to know. And we say to them, mate, you need to, it's better to know than not know, because we have lost people that have sat by the wayside, and then we find out 3 days later that unfortunately they've passed, and we could have avoided that. This is all about prevention. Our core is about awareness and education and preventative screening tests, and those tests will help. What we are seeing, though, is that more and more young people are presenting with issues, and a lot of those things are genetic or congenital issues. Like the last couple of years, we've had 9-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds collapse on the football field. Now, luckily, a lot of those were saved because there was somebody that knew CPR and there was a defib available. All right, and that's the next message we'd like to say to people, is really build up your skills around CPR, and also don't be scared about using a defib. They walk you through it. And the key message there is, you don't need to be trained, as in formally trained. Any attempt is definitely worth it in terms of trying to save a life in those situations. The other, I suppose, and it's a little bit off topic from your question, but the other key message there is, there's a very big difference between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest. Okay, so a heart attack's a plumbing issue. And typically when someone's having a heart attack, they are conscious, okay, and they're still moving around, and they may have collapsed. A defib is not required in that situation. You still need to call an ambulance to attend to the person. But if they're breathing and they're feeling unwell, then a defib is not required. It's a plumbing issue. There's blockages. A cardiac arrest is an electrical problem. Okay, it means the electrical pulse, your heart stops beating, and that's where the defib comes in, because the defib restarts your heart. So heart attacks can lead into cardiac arrest, but typically a cardiac arrest, that's why it's called sudden cardiac arrest, time is of the essence. So, call, push, shock. Call 000 straight away. Start CPR and do that. The importance of CPR in the cardiac arrest is it keeps blood flowing. And so the after effects, and if people survive, there's less what they term neurological impact, so brain damage and other damage to your body and your organs. And then obviously the push element, that's the push element. The shock element is the defib. All right. Only a working defib will save someone in a cardiac arrest, because it's going to shock that. And they're easy to use. Don't be scared to use them. There are good examples of certain associations that run, a pre-season defib cup. And we were at one at Manly on the weekend, and they do a fantastic job. It's been running for 6 years because they lost someone and they felt helpless. And they started the defib cup. 32 teams come on that day. They play a bit of football, but it's really about building their confidence and using a defib. So on the weekend, 327 guys and girls attended those refresher courses for using a DFib. So that means there's 327 extra people in our community prepared and able to use that. And then we did just over 100 or just under 100 heart health checks for people, which was fantastic. So, look, there's many good examples, but the reality is, Marco, that we've lost over 20 players in the last 8 years on our football fields or within an hour of play or training. We collect that data and we contribute to a global FIFA sudden death registry report. And we're collecting that data across Australia. What we also know is that we probably don't have every incident that has happened. So even though I say there's been 20 deaths in the last 8 years, there's probably been more that we have not been advised of or are aware of. So look, it's important. A lot of these things are avoidable. And so that's where the heart health checks, looking after yourself, because we want everyone to play. We want everyone to have fun, young, old, whatever, male, female, doesn't matter. Because there is literally, it's anyone, anytime, anywhere is the message when it comes to heart health issues and cardiac arrest in particular.
Yes, that's very good information. And speaking off the back of that, we have people in the association. We lose people from the association, unfortunately, every year, and it's difficult because there are so many members and so many people tied to this community, and it's always sad when the news passes through our door. I think the one thing that has come good from Lewis's situation from Glenwood is that something is coming from it. You mentioned the Manly DFib Cup, as you mentioned, it's been going on for 6 years. I think that's a wonderful initiative. But you also mentioned earlier on in your answer to that question that it's important that men in particular take the opportunity to go to a GP, do a checkup, learn the skills, learn what CPR is and how to administer it and the like, which is why I think what you guys at Heartbeat Football are doing with Glenwood is such an important thing. So I think we should talk about that and wrap this up with the most important part, which is on April 1st, you guys will be helping out Glenwood and greater, the entire 24 clubs within our association and Blacktown in general. So can you give me a bit of insight into what's happening in terms of logistically on that day and in terms of what people will be learning and who's invited to come down and come from it certainly safer? Tell me what's happening.
Look, sadly, as you say, we lost Lewis recently, and Glenwood reached out to us and said, and told us about the incident. We've offered a free heart health day, and we'll be there with the Victor Chang nurses doing heart health checks for whoever wants to come down, people at the club, friends, family. We encourage everyone to come down and get their heart health checked, because you never know, what might be lying underneath. We tell people, know your numbers. People talk about business and knowing the numbers in their business. Well, the same thing is relevant to us, is that you need to know your numbers, and it's better to know and take that preventative step and be safe. So we'll be down there testing in memory of Lewis and celebrating his life and his contribution to the club and the community there. Andy Pascalidis from our charity was at the funeral last Friday. It was a very sad day, obviously, for such a young person. But what I will also say is that it's not we're trying to debunk the myth it's just an older male situation. Females are equally affected, and the message and the facts are that heart disease is the #1 killer of all Australians, men and women. And what we're finding out more and more, and we put a post up today about women's heart health specifically, is that there's inequality in and around that, in the research that goes into women's heart health, the symptoms and the underrepresentation or misrepresentation because of underdiagnosis, because women's heart health presents very differently to men's. And so, we're here to save and look after everyone's sort of health and well-being and safety. And we want everyone to have a really good season. So we've donated this Heart Health Day to Glenwood because we have engaged with the Blacktown Association and your community over many years, primarily through the Jason Connolly Memorial Cup. It's another player that was lost, and they hold an annual day as well. And they've raised well over $50,000 for our charity, and we give that all back to clubs that they nominate, and many of those clubs are in the Blacktown Association, and some are in the Nepean and some other associations as well. But we encourage everyone to come down. We're there less than 10 minutes. You'll get your blood sugar, cholesterol, and blood pressure checked, and the nurses will talk you through if you've got some sort of issue with corrective action, and if it's really high, they'll be recommending you to go see your GP. And if they do recommend you go see your GP, please follow up, because we've had incidents where people haven't followed up, and then they've either ended up in ICU or unfortunately they've passed away. And that's what we're trying to do. Our goal and our mission is 0 deaths on the sporting ground in Australia. And our tagline is, no one should die playing the sport they love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a really good way to put it. So just confirming to our listeners that there is a free heart health assessment that's going on out at Glenwood on the 1st of April. Are you running that all day?
We are there for, I think, 4 or 5 hours.
Fantastic. Yeah, really good.
The details are on the Glenwood website and social media post.
Page, yes.
So they're definitely there. We'll be there, and we encourage other clubs to, reach out to us, book a Heart Health Day. But also importantly, we launched last week a national awareness campaign called the Heart Health Round, Make It Red. Football New South Wales, it's their first theme round for the season, and also Northern New South Wales Football have jumped on board and supporting it. And the whole purpose of that activation is at your club. You register on our website, heartbeatoffootball.com.au, and then you'll see the Make It Red button. Register your club, set up a fundraising profile. If you can, buy some red socks, because if you buy those red socks, that helps fundraise as well. If you want to buy a Heartbeat of Football red ball from Deploy, then please do. Bing Lee's come on board as official sponsor, which allows us to do a little bit more with that campaign. And so when clubs do register and come on board and host a day on the weekend of the 28th to the 30th of April, we'll be sending out balloons and banners so you can make a bit of colour around it. And then we host a barbecue, play in red, and other fundraising activities. And there are prizes for clubs who raise the most money. Now, the money that does get raised, some of it goes to Heartbeat of Football, but we're also raising money for women's heart health through Victor Chang, spontaneous coronary artery dissection, SCAD. It's a particular women-specific heart health issue. So we're raising money for them. And we're also raising money for another charity called NUCD, and that is unexplained cardiac death. And that affects under 50s more so. So young people who are passing away, and it's unexplained. Why? There's no symptoms. All their sort of factors and levels are all seem fine, and they're unexplained. So we need more research, and that's what the funds that are raised through Make It Red will go towards. Research for Victor Chang for women's heart health, women research for NGUC for under 50s unexplained cardiac death, and then also monies will come to us as well, so we can do more heart health testing. We are not funded by any government. We have got a lot of generous individuals and some smaller corporates, small businesses that provide some support that make it possible. And like I said, and we're thankful to Bing Lee, who's come on as the official sponsor. They've given us some money there as well that allows us to do some of these heart health checks as well in the community.
The link to Make It Red will be in the caption of this post. I will also, if I do remember 100%, to leave it up on the screen at this point in the video now as well. I'll make a mental note. It's important to look after yourselves, listeners from the BDSFA and beyond. Please take the opportunity, if you are available, on April 1st. It's certainly no Fool's Day on that day. It's a very important day. And it's an opportunity to look after yourself. And to the club members who are watching along, there's opportunities for you to be involved in your own ways off of the back of this, and to assure that only good things come now from a real casted shadow and tragedy-stricken moment at Glenwood's way. Let's hope that we can make the best of this, and that we don't have to see this in any association anytime soon. Really appreciate the work, Angelo, that you and the people around you are doing. I think it's wonderful. I really appreciate you being on here today. We're going to now cut back to a second part with some members from Glenwood, and just hear a little bit about legacy, and having heard now the introductory part about learning about the over 35s team, to now learning about the sort of intrinsic parts of what you guys do. And now you're going to hear sort of more of a reaction, and like I said, a bit about what that legacy could mean post April 1 at Glenwood. I think that'll be a really important part. So do stick around, but a final thank you to you, Angelo, for being on. I really appreciate it.
Mark, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And have a good season, everyone.
Welcome back to Foreman Reserve as we wrap up the first episode of the Blacktown Football Hour Podcast. Thank you for sticking around to this point, and I hope you learnt some vital information there, because certainly while I was listening while recording that, I did as well. 1st of April, there's going to be lots of things that you can do here in order to better yourself, and for men in particular, like Mark and Mark. It's something that we find a little bit more difficult according to the law of statistics and averages, but perhaps it's time to change that, and this can be the catalyst for change. April 1st, Happy to Football, happy here to help out, and it's free of charge as well. I just want to get your thoughts on how appreciative you are for them being willing to help out.
Look, I think it's a great thing and a necessity that we need to do this for everybody. I didn't know about it until this situation with Lewis has come up. I didn't know that this even existed. So it's alarm bells. You need to know, and for them to come on board and show it to us and help us out, I just think it's a great thing. And it's needed. I don't want to lose any more. I don't want to lose anyone else. Like, it's not a good feeling. So if we can just do this and everyone rock up and check yourself. It's doesn't take bugger all time to do, and it could save lives.
Now, Mark Thompson is a guy who is so connected within his community that he's actually not going to be playing this year due to injury, but he's still around, he's still here. He's actually come back for a second time today in order to talk about this to you guys, which means it's of significant importance to him. And that just shows that for someone who wasn't 100% aware of yes, it can happen to someone I know or to me or to someone very close to me. It's an experience he's had to go through, and the fact that he's here on a very random Wednesday afternoon and evening now, that he's happy to talk to this extent with you guys. So I'm very appreciative of the words that you've contributed today. Very, very appreciative, of course, and to Heartbeat. My last question to you would be around Lewis and how you'd like to remember him. A reminder that yes, people in the BDSFA, we find that members or past members do unfortunately pass on every year, but this one in particular is particularly close to, I think, everyone, because something so wonderful is coming from it, and you never know what could come from it in a positive way. The checkup might find something that's life-saving in the near future. So how would you like Lewis's name to be sort of remembered around Glenwood and potentially even further around the BDSFA now that this is all happening?
Yeah, so Lewis was the kind of guy that would go anywhere for you, would do anything for you. He was an electrician, so he'd come to my house when I'm not there and he'd fix stuff. He did it for a lot of people on our team. He wouldn't expect anything in return, so he would just do that out of the corners of his heart. He was always happy. His smile, like I said on the post, was affection. It was just ridiculous on how nice he was. He didn't have a bad bone in his body. He did everything for our team. He was the gel. He was the one that if you have an issue with somebody else, he was the one that was getting in between and just solving the problem. Half time he was doing the same thing, and he was always there. He was just always there. No matter, he lived over, like I said, he lived at Padstow. It was nothing for him to get in his car, come over here, and just help out. So he was just great guy. He was. He really. And you hear it all the time that people say that, but he genuinely was. He was just a terrific, kind-hearted soul that, didn't deserve to for this to happen to him. He was fit. He was one of our oldest, but he was definitely top 2, top 3 fittest. Wasn't losing his skill like the rest of us. It was just a shock. It was just a shock, and he was just a legend. He really was. For our team, and for the club, he was always here every week, no matter what. So he was gold. Sorely missed for sure.
Sure. And that's why it's so important that you guys use the opportunity to be here on April 1st and use a resource that could be life-changing. Definitely. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to Lewis and to his family for being so willing for Glenwood to share his story today and on social media in the weeks gone by. Thank you to Glenwood today for hosting us as well, and thank you to Heartbeat of Football, of course, who are going to be increasingly involved, I'm sure, as this year progresses on, starting from already, but particularly on April 1st. Mark, I'm very, very appreciative of your time today. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do, we're rolling right now, is I'm going to keep this quite raw, and that is this, in that Mark actually wanted to add something in regards to what's happening on April 1st, and just to remind that it's not a Glenwood community thing, it's a BDSFA community thing. So I don't have a question to ask here, but I'm just going to let you run with what you were telling me off the camera just then, and say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, no, look, I just wanted to just let everybody know that it's not a Glenwood thing. It is a community thing. It's a world thing, and what we're trying to do is just a small part of that. And I would just like everybody to come down on the 1st, especially obviously my age group, over 35s, that I play with all of yous every year. I have done for 15 years. Let's let my age go a little bit, but anyway, everyone come down on the Saturday. Like we're playing on the Friday, and then the next day, just come down here. I'll be on the barbecue from 7:30, so they'll be here, I think, from 9 or 10. I think they're coming down for a lot of hours. So just, if you can, take an hour out of your day, come down, say hello, get checked. I know I will be. I'm hoping to be one of the first, and just I don't care. Like, we're all adults, and I don't care who you play for. I just want you all to come down, and I don't want to happen what happened to our club and what happened to our best mate. If it can be prevented, why not? So that's all I wanted to say.
Perfectly well said. You'll get many reminders on this about this on the BDSFA page before April 1st. We've only just ticked over into the new month as well, so you'll have plenty of reminders before that. But this is your first announcement of it, and I think it's a really good announcement to have. Very, very well spoken today. We're going to wrap up and head to the outro now. Thanks very much one more time.
Thanks, mate.
The last time you saw me at the start of the episode, I was quite, like I said, the word I used was somber, and I was quite reserved in what I was saying. I was really thinking about the way in which I said things and the tone in which I said things. I want to be more positive to wrap up this episode because, in an association of 10,000 members, it's important to remember that it's likely that the ripple effect will be that we all know someone or a family who loses someone, and it's important to keep doing what we love here in the association and keep this community feeling going on. And so it's important to remember today, like any other day, it's important to look after yourselves and look after the people around you and stick close to those who you consider family or your adopted family, for example. So that Glenwood Over 35s team and that Glenwood community in itself. But even greater, the entire Blacktown footballing community. So something very good is about to come from something very unfortunate and heartbreaking. And God bless to the family, of course. So don't be afraid to come down on 1st of April. Mark it in your calendars. You've got plenty of time. There'll be plenty more warnings. And by warnings, I mean Facebook posts going up and reminders and emails sent out to clubs as well to forward to you. So the opportunity is there to take that extra step to look after yourself. And as mentioned numerous times throughout the interview segments, you don't know until you do check. So it's important to. Now, let's bring things back into the present and even looking into the future. And let's have a look at what you can expect from next week's episode and a little bit of a wrap up of what you've heard. So, fantastic start from our AYL and our Blacktown Spartans, and best of luck to the girls and the women who start this weekend. To those who are playing trial matches, sorry, a chair just moved. I think there's a ghost around here. I don't know how that happened. Anyway, back to the main point. I don't know how that happened. So to those who are playing trial matches, beware of the heat, please. It's been quite hot. The Monday most recently gone by was a 40-degree day out here in the west, so please look after yourselves and make sure you have ample water with you. Best of luck to those who are in trials, like I already said, but we're getting very much closer to round one, which is April 1st for most of you. For our Premier League, it's 18th, and then the next week after that as well. So, very, very exciting times. But for next week, speaking of Premier League, by the way, the Premier League ins and outs will make its debut seasonal episode, I guess. So, for the last couple of weeks, I've been talking to Premier League clubs, all 17 of them, and basically getting them to write down all of their new transfers in and transfers out. So you're going to see the big names who switched in the off-season, who joined the champions, who left the champions, who joined the premiers, who left the minor premiers, who joined the promoted clubs, who left the promoted clubs. You're going to find out. And you're also going to get the chance to speak to some of them wearing their new colours. It might look awkward to look at the first point, but I'm sure once we get a few match of the rounds under our belt, we're going to be looking pretty used to seeing those guys in their new colours. I can give a hint. There are certainly some rivals who crossed over the over rival territory. So it's going to be really good fun. So keep an eye out on next week's episode, the Premier League Ins and Outs episode. Of course, until then, subscribe to the BDSFA YouTube page, go back to the Facebook page that you clicked on here to get to this episode, and go and like that post for me. And of course, like this video as well if you got something out of it. Mark April 1st in your calendars, please, not just for the start of the season, but before the start of something good to come from tragedy, and also start taking better care of yourself as well. I'll be there. And for the first time this year, and certainly not the last, cue the outro music.